James Zwerg was a freedom rider and one of the first. In a subject that focuses mostly on the contribution of African Americans, it is interesting to learn about his perspective. James Zwerg early on felt compelled to side with civil rights cause, mainly stemming from his religious background. When he told his parents that he had decided to do a freedom ride, his parents were completely against it. Zwerg called his mother to tell her where he was going. She replied, "Don't go," she said. "You can't do this to your father." Zwerg replied, "I have no choice. I have to," he said. His mother replied, "You just killed your father," and she hung up. Anyone who committed to do freedom rides understood that this was not something to take lightly. This is what a typical bus looked like that would be used for freedom rides. African American churches would sometimes donate their buses, knowing that they might not ever see it again. They also used old buses that they fixed up, or sometimes, if they had the money, they would rent out a bus. The night before the ride, he was reading from the Bible and came upon this passage that gave him comfort and courage. It was Psalm 27, verses 1 through 10. Verse number 10 really spoke to him. As the bus pulled up to the destination, James said that, quote, "I have never felt so alive than when I was a freedom rider," end quote. As the doors hissed open, and it wasn't 2 minutes before the attack began. He and several others were attacked physically and with words, racially offensive words, and had many horrible things thrown at them. "Race traitor" was commonly heard by James. Eventually, he was struck so hard that he fell to the ground and was surrounded by others kicking and punching him. He blacked out and woke up in a hospital alongside a fellow rider named John Lewis. Zwerg looked like a bloody scarecrow. His eyes were blackened and his suit was splattered with blood. His nurse even told him that his attackers were still looking for him, so she drugged him so that if they found him, he wouldn't be able to feel any of what they might do to him. Years later, after the freedom ride, his parents told him that when they had seen those pictures and seen on TV what happened to him, they said that that was the hardest thing for them to see, and that the only way that he would be able to understand how that felt was when he would eventually have his own children. Zwerg did not have very much reconciliation with his parents. The closest it came was when his mother attended one birthday and then never came back again. After he was hospitalized, a news crew filmed him on his bed, barely able to speak. Zwerg declared that violence wouldn't stop him or any of his friends. The freedom rides would go on. The news article that went out with his picture and following TV news shows went viral and was a launchpad to more freedom rides. It was particularly disturbing to white audiences to see a young man beaten and bloodied and tattered, especially since it was of their own ethnicity. Seeing this caused a lot of backlash and actually drove a lot more support towards freedom rides. Here we can see a reunion of some of the freedom riders who survived that ride. It has been almost 40 years or more since they have seen each other on that fateful morning when they pulled up to their destination. It was a joyous occasion and also a sad one. Unfortunately, there was at least 3 members of their group that had not survived that morning. Zwerg became one of the movement's first heroes. Although his physical wounds healed, the emotional ones took longer. He was racked with guilt and depression after the beating. He drank too much, contemplated suicide, and finally had to seek therapy. He says he attended a reunion at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute and Museum in Alabama. During the ceremony, Zwerg was walking with a crowd of Freedom Rider colleagues when he saw the famous pictures of his battered face in a video and displayed on the museum wall. Zwerg said, quote, "I looked at it, and what it brings back to me more than anything else is that I got so much notoriety because I was white. I looked at that picture and I thought of all the people that never get their names in a book, never get interviewed, but literally had given their lives. Who the hell am I to have my picture up there?" End quote. He was suddenly flooded with guilt. He started bawling during the ceremony as startled people looked on. Then another Freedom Rider veteran, a strapping black man named Jim Davis, walked over to Zwerg. Zwerg's voice trembles with emotion as he recalls what Davis said. Quote, he said, "Jim, you don't realize that it was your words from that hospital bed that were the call to arms for the rest of us." End quote. And then, as Davis wrapped his big arms around Zwerg, in front of the startled crowd, the 2 men cried together.